Okay, here is a video on Auto Flow. And Auto Flow is an improved version, if you will, of the Rhino Flow Along Surface command. And so I'm going to go ahead and show Flow Along Surface first, and then I'll show Auto Flow and the advantages that it has over that command. So I have a finger rail and I have a curve out here. And I did sweep 1 and swept this curve to make the orange surface. Okay, so there's my what will be the target surface or the flow surface. And the first thing you want to do when you're doing any kind of flow is you want to check and make sure that the surface normals of your surfaces are correct according to the world coordinates, which is the blue line and the orange line, so the Y and the X. Okay, so we're going to select that, and I'm going to go up to the top common commands and click on direction. Okay, and you'll see that if we look in this viewport that the blue line is oriented the same way as the construction plane, and so is the orange line, and the yellow, which is the Z, is pointing up. So this is the normal side of the surface, not this side, which would be the inside. Okay, so with that, I'll just go ahead and hit enter. And in order to do flow along surface from Rhino, which is right here, right here. Okay, this is flow along surface. You would need to create the UV curves from this surface. Okay, so we'd have to go to curve and go to UV and hit enter. And there is that surface pounded out flat, if you will. Okay. Now, number one, it's not centered or anything. Now, we could center it with the center command, which is very handy. Okay. And then I'll move it over here. At this point, I would click explode, which is here in the common. And I would do a sweep 2. It's just typically how I do it, so that this surface is swept in the same direction as this. And then you would want to check the normals, and you can see that they're not correct. I want to flip the yellow up, and I want to switch the V, which is the blue, and now I'm good to go. At that point, you could, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the same layer. There we go. At this point, you could start your flow operation. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I'm just going to get my typical donut out here. And we would come over to transform, flow along surface, select the objects to flow. There we go. Okay, and then you have some different options. Okay, copy equals yes, rigid is no, and so on. These are how I usually roll. Auto adjust is yes. Okay, so this is very important where you click. So I would click in this corner, and then I would come over and click in this corner, and it would do that flow. So now if I move this up, it should radiate out, and it does. And if I go this way, it should go down towards that corner, and that's all true. So the problem is, what if I want another one, and I hit Alt to make a copy? It was not one of the original objects that was in the flow. So you'd have to stop, select both of these, and if you pre-select them, it's easier. And then we would hit base surface right here and target surface here. and now we have 2. But I bet you can guess what happens if you want 3. So on and on we go. So autoflow is cool, but there's a lot of steps to that, and you have to keep track of everything. So autoflow is also in the transform menu, and it's the 3rd button right here. So once we click that, then it says select the base surface. It wants to automatically do the flow, but the function that JewelBeetle has an auto base. Okay, so there's the target surface, and there's the auto base that it can make. If it's a single surface, it can make this for you. As a matter of fact, if you there's a message saying that I deleted the base flow, which is true. If you have this selected already, and you go and click this, and then select auto base, then you don't have to pick it again. Okay, so now it's flowing. Now we should check our normals again and make sure that everything is okay. And usually if this one is okay, then our auto base is okay. Usually. You should always check them. Okay? And we already did check this one. So now if I come over and I'll go to my command history here and I add a donut, it just goes up on the screen. And there you go. Or you can drag one over, hit Alt, and it will flow it. Okay? And so that's pretty powerful because already you can see that it saved us several steps. Number 1, making the base surface, and number 2, on throughout the rest of the project we can sit and add things over and over again. Okay, let's take a look at the options though when we do this again. Then you'll notice too that if I delete them off the base, then they delete here as well. Okay, there's another warning that I've disrupted the auto flow, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. Okay, with this selected once again, I'll come up and hit auto flow, and we have an X and a Y margin. Okay, preserve structure is no, precision is high. We want it to do whatever it takes to preserve the model that is being moved around from the base to the target. Okay, and the tolerance, I'll have to show an example of that. Depending on how particular you want to be about when it puts an object from the base up to the target. If your tolerance is too fine, like perhaps 0.01 or 0.001, then it adds more ISO curves that it needs to maintain the integrity of the surface. And if you're not too worried about it, then you can get by with less of a tolerance, and that way the flow is faster and the resulting object is not as dense as it may not need to be. And I don't even know if that made sense, and I said it. So I'll show this tolerance in a different model. Having said that, let's talk about the X and the Y margin. Okay, so I'm going to hit auto base. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to solid, and I'm going to create a block. Okay, and we'll put that on a different layer. And this will not translate, by the way, so I'm glad I did that. If you change the layer here, it does not change it here. You would want to do that yourself. Okay, so now if we go ahead and I am going to, remember my X and my Y margins were 1, which is 1 millimeter. So I'm going to go ahead and offset by a distance of 1 millimeter, and I'll click this edge, and there is 1 millimeter. Okay, and you'll notice that it's getting flowed up onto the surface. Okay, so there's my curve. All right, so if I start going over towards that 1 millimeter boundary, okay, the minute I cross that 1 millimeter, the flow fails. It doesn't fail, it stops the flow. And that is because we had a 1 millimeter margin. And the reason we do that is that the further away from this surface that you get, the more chance of distortion that there is in the model. Okay. Plus, if you have a busy drawing, you may not want everything on the drawing going up on the flow. So you might want a tighter boundary as far as that goes. Now, on this flat surface, there's not going to be much distortion if we just keep going and going and going. But on a curved one, it would start to fold in on itself, you know, if this surface was domed or something. Now, as far as that goes, with auto flow, there is no limit on, well, I don't know about, never say never, but this range above the flow base, it'll just keep going. And you'll notice that it's getting bigger, so the further away, it's like a bike hub, you know, the wheel is really big and the hub is really small. So when this is down close, then there's less distortion. When it's out here, this is being spread out way out here, so this part gets longer. Oh, there, yeah, I think it's something crazy like, I don't know how many millimeters. We could measure it. Let's keep coming back. There it is. I just kind of want to know now. This is what happens when I do videos. There. Okay, so let's go ahead and measure that just for fun. So we'll go from here. Let's see. We'll turn on project, which is right here. And we'll come from here on down. It's probably about 100 millimeters. This is 96.8 right there. So there you go. So you can go about 100 millimeters above the base and it will still flow. Okay, there was a rabbit trail. Okay, so when you have 1 millimeter, this would be the Y and this would be the X. That's what that means. If I delete this, then that one goes away. And so there is how auto flow works just with that base. Okay, another advantage of auto base is that you can have multiple flows going at one time. So let's go ahead and let's make a donut here. That's a big one. And I'm going to select it and we'll put it on yellow so it shows up very well. And let's go ahead and select flow and we'll click auto base. So there is the base for that yellow item. Okay, and I'm not going to worry too much about what goes on there. I'm going to stick with donuts because I like donuts. I think I said that in another video. Okay, so that one works, and this one still works. Okay, and so we can make another one, and we can make another one, and so there's no trouble with, let's go ahead and let's do one more just because we can. So then I'll click here, And let's go ahead and click on Auto Base, and there's the base for that. And we'll come over and put a donut on there. And there we go. So they all, oh, there's history for you. So if I move this one, they all go. And here's this one. All right. So there's a bunch of flows. Now, we can get even trickier. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to start getting warnings up here that I'm getting rid of flow objects, and that's to be expected. So those will disappear on their own, in theory. If not, you can hit the X. Okay, so here's this flow. And let's go ahead and throw that on the same layer. And here's like a stick that I have. I made a ring the other day that had, it was mainly comprised of like twigs or something. So this is the start of my twig. And I've got it flown up there, I guess. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to click on Auto Flow and do base. And there's the base for this one that's being put up onto this one. Okay, I think you can see where I'm going with this. Now, I'm going to cooking show this, and I've got a texture out here that represents my twig surface. Okay, so it's just this bumpy height field thing that I made. Okay, and ideally this would match the exact size of my base, which we can do. We'll go ahead and say, okay, I've got project on. We'll go to transform and go to orient to. Copy equals yes or no, it doesn't matter, we can have a copy. So I'm going to pick right on this corner, and then pick on the opposite corner, and then I'm going to translate that to this corner and that corner. So now that is up there. Okay, we'll hit enter, and we're done. Okay, now we now have, and I can turn off this layer, we now have this flow being put onto this stick, but you're like, hey, this isn't getting flown up onto here. And in the order that we did it, that is true, but here's all we have to do. If you select this surface and hit Control X, which is cut, or you could come up here to cut, okay, and then simply go Control V or paste, all right, and it'll redo that. And now this one's being flown onto here, and it's going up onto there, okay. And so there's, and then if we go ahead and like move this up, let's say we want this to be a little thicker, then it's going to move it here, and it will move it here. So now the flow is complete. It's going from one to the other. All right, so there's a flow with a kind of an inception flow, if you will, a flow within a flow. And like I say, this one now will update. Might take a moment. There's a lot of information here, but there you can see it's going down inside the tube, or like I said, I can make it thicker. And now it's going there and then there. All right, so there is a flow on top of a flow. Now let me go back to the tolerance that I was talking about earlier. Okay, so this is an old model that I use when I used to teach flow, teach in matrix. And So here is the here's the pattern. It's just a line, and it's got different profiles. Here we can turn off. We can turn this off, and so it just goes from red to yellow to red to yellow to red, and so on, and that makes that pattern. Okay, and then we've got the opposite pattern going this way. Okay, so there's my pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and start Auto Flow. And you'll notice that the tolerance is 0.1. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and with Rhino, with a typical, well, let me show you where it is. This will be, if we type options and then go into units, okay, our absolute tolerance is 0.001, and that's typically what we go with a typical JewelBeetle. When you hit File New, we leave the absolute tolerance at 0.001 unless you change it. Okay, and that helps with Booleans, being able to sort the tolerance of the relationship of two objects, and some other things is like cage edit, and also some of the flow commands, whether it's ours or Rhino's. And if we go ahead and mimic that setting, okay, so now I'm going to start Auto Flow, okay, and I'm going to switch my tolerance to 0.001, okay, and hit enter. So now that's my tolerance. You can do that inside of our command. You don't have to go options, absolute tolerance, and so on. You can set it on the fly no matter what the Rhino viewport or the Rhino document is saying. Okay, so now we're not going to click auto base because we already have one. So I'm going to go click the base, and I can just click there, and then I can click the flow surface or the target surface here, and then we wait because there's a lot of objects out there, and my tolerance is 0.001. So it's like, okay, well, I can't deviate by more than 1,000th of a millimeter, and you can see just saying that out loud, it's overkill. Well, let's see, 0.12, yeah. So 0.1 would be tenths, and then 0.01 would be hundredths, and 0.001 is thousandths, and so that flow is taking this long, and it's because our tolerance is so high. I'm going to go ahead, instead of rambling, I'm going to go ahead and hit pause, and I'll be back when it comes back. Okay, I'm back. That actually, you know, when you're watching something like water boil, it seemed like it took forever. That took another like 3 minutes almost to get that up there. Okay, and you can see that at that resolution, okay, or that tolerance, I mean, look at the ISO curves. There's just a cajillion of them. Now, it didn't deviate from this surface at all, you know, like, okay, if you really needed it to be just that precise, then okay. But, wow, you know, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit undo. Okay, so that removes that. Now, hitting undo like that, I may have to restart the flow. We'll see what happens. I may have to cut these and paste them again like I did earlier with that branch. But let's see what happens. Okay, so now I'm going to hit flow again, auto flow, and I'm going to change my tolerance back to 0.1. Okay, that's where it defaulted to begin with. All right. And then we'll select, now you'll notice when I'm selecting the base surface, I don't have to be real careful like I did with Rhino. I can just click here, and then I can click here. Okay, yeah, so this, it's like, hey, there's already a flow on this, and this keeps you I actually knew this was going to happen. I was setting you up. This keeps you from using a flow base in multiple operations, which can really kind of lead to havoc. Okay, so if you see that, then what we'll do is we'll cut this one. Okay, and we'll start over, and we'll go ahead and say flow. Point one is my, and then I'm going to go ahead and use this auto base, and I'm going to move it. So you cannot have one auto base be used in multiple flows. Okay, that is a rule. So I'm going to click there, and I'm going to click right there, and now it's flowing. If we look over here, okay, the minute that I put that over there, but we're at point one, and so that went up there pretty quick. And you can see that it's a decent amount of ISO curves, but nothing crazy, okay? And so there is a good example of when you want to do that as far as your tolerance goes on the flow object. Okay, so that pretty much is how auto flow works, and it's pretty powerful.